Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
And we say good morning to the Otaki Ward Councillor, James Cootes. Good morning, James.
Good morning.
I should imagine you've got a little tin of 3-in-1 oil to sharpen up your bikes, and you've got the okay for the big shared pathway to be constructed.
I better dust the cobwebs off my mountain bike, you're right.
Well, that's good news for the community, isn't it? That means we've got a cycleway all the way from where? South of Mackay's Crossing right through to Otaki.
Absolutely. And that's something that I've kind of stressed, is this isn't just about a cycleway for Otaki. This is a shared pathway that will stretch from Otaki all the way through to Paikokariki. I mean, there'll be a few little gaps in between, but ultimately you could arrive in Paikokariki and spend the day cycling up the coast all the way through to Otaki and vice versa. So that's pretty cool, and it's something that as a community indirectly we haven't had to pay for. It's one of those rare opportunities where you have an opportunity with central government to leverage off their projects and get an asset that enhances our community. So I'm really, really pleased.
So does it sort of include the landscaping and things like that for the pathway?
Yeah, look, it does. I think, to be clear, there's not as much opportunity with the Peka to Otaki stretch of road as there was with the Mackay's to Peka. If you think that road went through barren farmland, and there was, a lot of natural landscaping available, contours and so forth, for that path, where the Peka to Otaki alignment is a lot more narrow and constrained. So it's not that the project team haven't offered us the best, say, shared pathway. It is literally what they can do within the space available. So I've seen the early plans, and I'm still pleased with the outcome.
So where will we get onto it in Otaki to come south? Where will it start?
Look, so there's a little bit of discussion still around there, and I guess Otaki is a little bit different to the Mackay's to Peka project, where the road actually does sneak right through the centre of our town. So if you're familiar with where it goes in behind the State Highway 1 shops on the eastern side, just sort of snuggled up against the railway lines there. So the finer details of that area of, the shared pathway still haven't been confirmed, but what we have made really clear is that we want it to go to north of Otaki. Sort of future-proofing it if there is an opportunity for it to continue on through to Levin if the Otaki to north of Levin road goes. But at the moment, I think I could probably safely say around the Otaki railway station would be a good place to sort of park up and get on there. We're also looking at the site south of Otaki, just as you get off the Otaki bridge where all of the construction is taking place. Once the Fletcher's team are finished there, that site, which is still quite, level and compacted, would actually make a great car park. And one of the things that we learned from the Mackay's to Peka project was that although we've got a great shared pathway, there's no real opportunities to park up and actually unload either horses or bicycles and so forth. So that's something that we've raised with the project team, and looking at where the opportunities lie at the Peka end and at the Otaki end in terms of a parking facility for people to be able to do that.
Right. And of course horses can be using this path as well, I suppose.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I always refer to shared pathway, because no malice intended. People often just refer to it as a cycleway, but it is a shared pathway. We've got young families using it for cycling. We've got older people using it with e-bikes and push bikes and so forth. And I've even seen mobility scooters at times on there. And you'll see, horses from time to time. And that's another thing that I know the equestrian community are working strong on, is actually having Kapiti as one of the first equestrian friendly communities in terms of being able to get around the district. So it's certainly something from an economic development perspective that I've been pushing. As I said, this is more than just a cycleway. There are social benefits in terms of health and well-being, but there are also economic benefits as well. I know people that own push bikes that are more expensive than my car, and I know that the equestrian community spend a lot of money as well. So if we can make that attractive to them and make it attractive to people outside the district to come into the district, then that's a good win for the community from an economic perspective.
Gosh, I noticed a big difference last night when I went through to Levin. Every time you go up through Otaki, the difference with the expressway going through, they're certainly moving along at a fair pace, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's becoming quite real to people in terms of the pace at which the project's moving. It is due for completion in 2020, and there's no holding up. So, I think the great thing about it, it does give people certainty. It's not a project that sort of lingers on forever. They get in, you get the job done, and it's pretty tight time frame, so we're working on different, so when I say we as a council and as a community board, working with Fletchers on, certain aspects of the design, things like the bridge designs and the gateway entrances, and we're literally, having to hold meetings to make decisions because they need to move on to the next stage. So it's not being rushed, if I could be really clear, but it's, certainly there's no mucking around either.
No. On another topic, Otaki submissions to the Greater Wellington Regional Council. You no doubt have plenty going in for the rates increase they're intending to apply to the area.
Yeah, so look, Otaki, I didn't personally write the submission. Christine, the community board chair, and the rest of the board had input into that, although I had seen it. And I, like many others, are quite alarmed or concerned at the rate increase that Greater Wellington are proposing. It challenged me a little bit. I mean, as our council, we have obviously looked at our rating model, and the message that we've gone out there with is that it's a matter of fairness, and so we've looked at the fairness across the district. And so when I looked at the Greater Wellington one, that was kind of their argument as well. So that challenged me in terms of how could I guess, be upset or oppose the increases that they're suggesting. But then as I sort of thought about it further, well, the other angle that we come from for our council was around affordability. So when we did the rating review, we were looking at fairness and we were looking at affordability. And I think it's one of the things that Greater Wellington hasn't taken into account is the ability for our ratepayers to be able to pay that increase. And so we did look at that, and hence why there's now $500,000 proposed as targeted rate on businesses to provide more fairness and alleviate the burden on residential ratepayers.
Yes, our Greater Wellington Regional Rep Penny Gaylor said it's an equalisation of rates right across the region. So if that's the case, and it may be a good reason to do it, but does it have to be all in 1 year? Can it not be spread over a number of years?
Yeah, so look, we had a meeting in council yesterday, full council meeting, and you referred to the Otaki Community Board submission to Greater Wellington, whereas I'd probably more refer to the council's submission into Greater Wellington, which I appreciate you probably haven't had an opportunity to see. That in more detail talks to that equalisation of property values, and actually refers to the very thing that you've raised in terms of how fast they're looking at doing that. We've raised questions over when that those valuations were done and the accuracy of the valuations. The staff and the councillors and the mayor have a lot of concerns around the Greater Wellington proposed increases, and our submission talks to that and asking for, well, firstly, just making it very clear that we oppose the level of increases that they're suggesting, and asking for answers in regards to some of the ways that they've come to those decisions.
Yes, I was also thinking that landlords will have to put up their rents to cover this sort of thing too, which is no help to anyone.
No, that's right. It's a vicious cycle. We're sort of moving on to central government rather than local government, but it's the same as the government proposing petrol taxes. On one hand, I try to stay politically neutral in the discussions that I have, but on one hand talking about helping vulnerable families, and then on another hand they raise, say, the fuel tax, which for someone like myself, I've just gone out and bought a hybrid car to try and manage, I guess, our fuel costs a bit better. But for a lower income family that may not have the ability to make those decisions around changing vehicles or the use of vehicles, they'll just be lumped with another $20 to $30, in their fuel bill. So, there are some challenges for any government. On one hand, you want to try and fix, say, the public transport system, provide better alternatives or options, but without affecting those that can't afford it. So, as we say, our rating mechanism is a blunt tool, and that's not just in Kapiti, it's right across the district. People want it to be, say, all user pays, where you pay for what you use. Other people want it to be based on occupancy in terms of, how many people live in a home. At the end of the day, when we look at all the tools we have in the toolbox in terms of rates, they're all pretty blunt instruments. And at the end of the day, there's always going to be a situation where you might be paying for a pool that you may never use.
Yes, it's a very tricky one, there's no doubt about it, and it's not just us here, it's right around the country that are feeling these effects too.
Oh, absolutely, and one of the things that frustrates me, and you've just used an example with Greater Wellington, value. So there are so many different rating models right across the country, and that, it does make it confusing for people. It does create a kind of a them and an us, or why do they do this and why do we do that? And to be fair, sometimes, as an example with Wellington, they have a very big, strong business CBD, so they get a lot from their commercial rates, which subsidises residential rates. So, I guess potentially if we had adopted Wellington's model in terms of their rating model, it might not actually work that well for Kapiti, because we don't have that strong business CBD or an airport. That's right. Which they get dividends from and so forth.
Yeah, big input from the airport, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, getting away from that one, any other submissions you put in from the KCDC yesterday that you can tell us about?
No, nothing that springs to mind off the top of my head. Just the Greater Wellington one, which had a lot more in it than just around the rates.
Yes.
We obviously referred to things like the stormwater, climate change, coastal erosion, and public transport was probably the key topics that was raised in that submission.
Sure. Just getting to something local, Haruatai Park, anything you wish to tell us about there? Because there was a lease concession discussed yesterday. I presume that was just passed, was it?
Yeah, look, it was, but I think the key thing out of that lease agreement, and it wasn't, I guess, the only thing about a lease agreement, but it's just been a change in the approach to the use of that facility, is the club that uses the tennis courts and so forth, we've been in negotiations with them just around making that available to the public. And so I don't know the finer details of it off the top of my head, but ultimately the news or the message is that public will now have access to use those courts, and so the pool staff will be unlocking it in the mornings and locking it in the evenings. And so that's a facility that ratepayers have had to pay for in terms of maintaining surfaces. There's some money budgeted in the LTP to redo the surface. And so we've had some pretty good chats with the club there, just saying, look, this should be made available for the community to use as well, and they agreed. So, that's a positive one for the community to have that amenity now available to use. Obviously, the club still has access when they need it for club events and so forth, and but it's available to the public to use as well.
Might even give them some new members.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, James, I'll let you get back to work. We thank you for your valuable time. Have a good week.
Always a pleasure. You too.
There we are. That's James Cootes, Otaki Ward Councillor.
106.3 Beach FM.